everyone. Thank you for joining us for the new episode of Landscape Vignettes. Today we have team named Team Plus and their shortlisted entry at Entekochi Competition was called Katha Malasari. Team Plus is a group of members collaborated together from varied fields: architecture, urban design, landscape architecture, and urban planning, of which four members, architect A.R. Ramanathan, architect Snehanshu Mukherjee, architect Siddharth Mishra, and architect Anamika Bagchi, are from design firm named Team based in Delhi, which is an organization which was formed in 1985 by a group of architects. The firm has grown over 30 years as a close-knit group of creative professionals from fields of architecture, urban design planning, building and engineering, and management. The other collaborators are landscape architect Adit Pal, who has a project experience of 25 years in both US and India, and he also has been associated with academia in both countries. Landscape architect Saurabh Popli and an associate professor at Department of Landscape at School of Planning and Architecture, Bhopal. His research has focused on complex, contested, and obscure ways in which landscapes shape and are shaped by culture. An urban planner, GIS expert, Shubham Mishra, he uses his training of urban planner to explore landscape both built and natural to link the present to the past. I would now hand it over to Anamika from the team Plus to begin with their presentation.
The story of our competition entry, self-titled by us as Katha Malasari, spans across 5 cities, 2 time zones, and nearly 2.5 months. The way the team came together, the process of working and putting together the final outcome, is a story that is as important to the final entry as the design decisions themselves. So we will begin with introducing the team. So there is us from team, A.R. Ramanathan, Snehanshu Mukherjee, Siddharth Mishra, and myself, Anamika Bagchi. Adit Pal and Saurabh Popli are the landscape architects, and Shubham Mishra, the urban planner and GIS expert. We will now begin our presentation. So to give us a moment to put on the slides. So our story for the Malasari Canal Precinct began with our approach based on fundamental principles of conservative and appropriate intervention directed towards a goal of holistic transformation of the precinct and the canal. This was executed through a set of decisions at the macro as well as micro levels simultaneously. The first macro level decision was to uncover the canal wherever it was covered, to bring it back to the forefront, visually as well as ecologically. This presented us with the issues of tackling the design of the Fashion Street Market and the access to private properties along Canal Road in the Karikamuri area. The next decision was to do with the mapping of open public land that helped us assess the way in which the components of water-sensitive urban design could be applied. The suitability or applicability of any proposal had to be determined in our minds by the location and the amount of land that was available for intervention. Our initial vision of reviving the canal as a waterway with vibrant markets on its banks was severely compromised once we determined the available land space and scale. It would have been easy enough for us to assume plentiful rights of eminent domain to release large tracts of land, but that was not a realistic approach.
So the eventual macro level decisions at the master plan level were taken based on our vision for the canal to be a thread that stitches the diverse areas along its edges. And these decisions also helped us firm up our choice for the 2 sub-sites that were designed in greater detail. Of the 3 sub-sites, of which we were required to address 2, we decided to tackle the eastern end with the KSRTC bus stand that's on the right of the aerial photograph at the top, and the middle site, which is the Fashion Street sub-site B. While the KSRTC sub-site had plenty of area, It's an extremely challenging urban design, transportation, and ecological problem created by the intersection of road infrastructure, the canal itself, and stormwater management in a low-lying zone. The Fashion Street MG Road subsite, on the other hand, was extremely limited in area, and the solution required the weaving of several strategies through the existing matrix of built structures, roads, and mature vegetation.
The actual design exercise was undertaken simultaneously at two levels. Using the framework of the United Nations Agenda 2030 of People, Planet, Prosperity, Partnership, and of course peace, we established and analyzed the broad issues highlighted in the design brief as well as our visions for the precinct. This framework helped us map the problems, stakeholder recommendations, and potential of the precinct and the subsites in a way that brought out critical interventions and the manner in which we could address the problems so as to achieve co-benefits for stakeholders. Our intention was to ensure each action under any one area of people, planet, prosperity, and partnerships was reinforced by actions and outcomes in other areas, resulting in well-rounded interventions. These interventions were then mapped out on the physical sites within the precinct. The synergies between all the critical areas were clearly concentrated in the design interventions of the subsites, especially around the KSRTC bus station and the Fashion Street. So at the master plan level, our moves were directed by some broad considerations. Two most important ones were to reimagine Mullasery within the larger ecological system, pointing to the revival of its ecological and hydrological functions for the precinct, and also towards larger goals of coastal climate resilience. The second important aspect was to re-envision Mullasery Canal for and of the people of Kochi by ensuring that all actions focus on people and they are also the initiators of the transformation of the precinct. This was aided by actions within the areas of green growth principles for prosperity and focus on collaborative efforts for taking ahead the transformation through very strong partnerships. And it was assumed that our proposals could be easily woven into the already established methods of participative efforts towards sustainable development in Kochi and the state of Kerala as well.
So the other level was to create strategies at the precinct and subsite level for ecology, hydrology, placemaking and mobility, and built environment. We therefore developed narratives for each of these themes, which formed a large part of our online discussions as a team. So the first sector to be tackled was obviously the hydrology ecology narrative for the master plan level decisions. This was, needless to say, closely linked to the sanitation and the drainage of the entire catchment area. Apart from the obvious uncovering and cleaning of the canal, stormwater management required interventions which were twofold. One was the reduction in surface runoff by promoting green roofs wherever possible. So we've identified that as number one on the slide. And rain gardens and using existing public softscape areas to act as shock absorbers by buffering storm runoff. And number two, to create more room for the canal by widening and treating the edges of the canal to increase capacity to accommodate variable water volumes. So this was accomplished through detention ponds at the KSRTC subsite and by regrading the edge of the adjacent land at the Maharaja College's ground just south of Fashion Street.
So to address sanitation, a graded system of solutions was thought of. The application of DWATS, which is decentralized wastewater treatment systems, with grey water recycling via flushing systems was our preferred choice. However, since this entails large-scale refurbishments which may not be immediately viable for individuals, a secondary method of root zone treatment was proposed to be implemented. And lastly, where space constraints would not allow RZT, aquaponic systems were proposed to recycle the treated grey water. Incidentally, a successful pilot project for aquaponics exist in a small village called Cherai, which is very close to Kochi.
So then, poring over the street view images on Mapillary, which was new for some of us. It's a user-driven street-level imagery platform, collaborative platform. It helped us see the ground reality regarding the imageability of the entire precinct. The canal, as Anamika pointed out, is mostly visually disconnected from movement paths. So our main intent was to address not only the connectivity between the three nodes, that is of the KSRTC bus station on the right, the metro station, which is in the middle, and the jetty, which is on the left, but also to use placemaking and pedestrian shortcuts as stitching devices to weave the canal back into the city fabric. So this led to the development of new urban nodes in conjunction with the existing nodes being in blue and the new urban nodes being in red. And these were created with the objective of layering multiple activities involving a wide range of users and increasing safety through the day and night.
While the decisions regarding hydrology and ecosystem related aspects of the canal were specific in the type of interventions, we realized that any built interventions would need to be robust and flexible to be implementable. So the designs for the redeveloped Fashion Street Market and the bus station were both based on open building systems, which is a concept that was introduced very long ago by John Bracken. And the diagram that you see on the screen is something that sort of summarizes the concept. So these systems were used, which lent these structures a high level of adaptability. And as a spatial and construction system, afforded the possibility of our designs not being very deterministic in nature. At the master plan level, then, these thematic narratives crystallized in the form of specific interventions across these three domains. The focus was on creating solutions threading all stakeholders and benefiting from their synergies, and the driving philosophy was that of the Gidesian concept of conservative surgery.
So that leads us to the discussion on what were our planning constraints, and after that, what were our land constraints. So as far as planning constraints go, several factors shaped our subsequent design decisions. The first was the givens in terms of urban design level decisions already taken by the KMC, like the pedestrianization of one carriageway of MG Road, or the proposed green corridor along the railway tracks between the KSRTC bus station and the train station. That's the green dashed line on the left. In some cases, such as the design brief mandate of expanding the capacity of this bus station or creating a library and a convention center with a 400-person capacity auditorium on the Law College plot, that's the photograph on the right, that already has numerous mature trees. These were conditions that precluded exploration for any alternative solutions which might have been more suited to a dynamic urban transformations. So then the second factor was the land constraints, especially in terms of land available along the canal. Our strategies for hydrology, sanitation, ecology, and build form were grounded in systemic solutions that were viable and implementable within the existing space constraints. Many of our conceptual solutions never made it through the tight sieve of spatial and practical implementability. We had, regular discussions on these. For instance, the Jewish cemetery, which is the image on the top, is a very large piece of open land, and it's very suitable for hydrological considerations per se, but obviously we quickly realized that interventions may not be any feasible in reality. Some cosmetic changes might be possible by the community, but large-scale regrading or disturbance of the earth in any way wouldn't be possible. Similarly, the Maharaja College ground, that's the image on the bottom, it being private land, it could not be used for typical water-related urban design strategies, all of which require active interventions on the land.
So, the resultant design proposal was in the form of a continuous, well-connected and experientially diverse pedestrian path and cycle track, which we can see highlighted in red on the upper part of the image. These paths and tracks connected the 3 transit nodes and paratransit points and also strung together transformed urban nodes like the Fashion Street Market and created new quote-unquote places like at the Municipal Waste Collection Ground and the Sewage Pumping Station corner. The canal road from the intersection of Karikamuri Cross was proposed to be an e-vehicle, NMT and pedestrian zone with only vehicles of the residents allowed to ply one way. This was aimed at catalyzing a transformation of this stretch into a pedestrian-friendly environment with appropriate activities along the edges.
So we also introduced the concept of borrowed edges, and that's shown in the diagram on the right, that would incentivize pocket-sized, privately opened public spaces, that's POPs for short, to support the mobility-related interventions. Similarly, the pedestrianized carriageway of MG Road was designed for a wide pedestrian walkway edged on one side by the municipal park, and you can see that in the rendering on the right-hand side. And a cycle track was there along with it, and on the other side by a platform below the carriageway supporting evening and informal markets. You can see that on the left of the rendering. The presence of the park could then be further used by introducing a plant nursery and a composting unit, which would recycle the organic waste from the informal market.
The built interventions were seen as flexible, adaptable urban inserts that act as containers of activities which would revive and transform the entire precinct. These were envisaged to catalyze transformation and harness the potentials of synergies between different stakeholders. As an example, the proposed built intervention in the Law College hostel compound and the channelization of the movement of St. Teresa students between their college and the hostel compound through the redesigned Municipal Waste Collection Center were opportunities to harness such potentials. We saw possibilities in promoting interaction between Kudumbashree workers and students from St. Teresa. So Kudumbashree workers were likely to be working in the waste collection compound. Then we also saw possibilities in promoting interaction between the students from both colleges, between scholars of the Law College and the informal settlements of Padika Kukulam as well.
So that concludes the first part of the broad presentation, and now we'll discuss the individual subsites. So the first one is the Fashion Street. Now this was the more straightforward of the two subsites we selected to focus on, in the sense that the design intents were pretty achievable. Available unbuilt land was used to create more room for the canal for inundation during slides, and you can see that where the black arrows point, and you have the canal going from left to right, and then wherever we could create some additional storage for stormwater, we proposed that. This strategy, however, was constrained by the presence of mature trees, so widening this southern bank of the canal was done with attention to leaving as much space for the root systems of the trees as feasible. The absence of any information about the tree types and therefore the knowledge about their root systems and structures, this did not allow us to be any more precise in offering a solution. But the creation of the low-lying seasonally inundated areas, which you can see in the section at the top below the building, this became a starting point for placemaking. So using the reorganization of the Fashion Street shops on stilts and establishing pedestrian connections from the Maharaja College Metro to the shops and surrounding nodes. The raising of the Fashion Street shops on stilts, and here's a more detailed rendering, it enabled the integration of the reorganized market with the low-lying areas below And secondly, it offered the benefit of maintaining access and preventing losses to these shops in the event of flooding.
Two mobility-related moves were also made. The street was envisioned as a one-way vehicular street to free up space for creating a cycle track and a pedestrian pathway. The parking lot that is visible towards the upper central part of this image was redesigned to accommodate a scissor parking system that freed up space for building a small shopping complex complementary to the Fashion Street shops with a forecourt. The intent here was to create an added attraction to Fashion Street and leverage the potential of profits from these shops to cross-subsidize the refurbishment and redevelopment of the Fashion Street shops.
So the integration of the Fashion Street with the pedestrianized carriageway of MG Road that you can see in this rendering, it used the compound of the sewage pumping station as a kind of a corner pivot in the form of a pocket-sized plaza where we felt that existing vendors could be rehabilitated and the facade of the pumping station itself, which is the gray building at the back and not particularly attractive, it could be used for digital infographic displays about sanitation and the canal. So we felt in the end that this multi-pronged approach, including media and graphics, would help sensitize people to pertinent issues, since this corner already has a high visibility for pedestrian and bicycle movement in both directions.
So now we come to the second subsite which we designed in greater detail, which is the KSRTC bus station. While we initially thought of avoiding the bus station subsite due to the possible complex transportation-related design aspects, the potentials of this site for the implementation of other strategic decisions and visions actually outweighed the quote-unquote tricky design for the bus station itself. As with the master plan level, the decisions and also like the Fashion Street subsite, the basic site planning moves were arrived at fairly quickly. The proposed green corridor connecting South Ernakulam station with the bus station, the demand for a strong solution for the problems of flooding within the site, and the degradation of the canal ecosystem, especially at the junction of Mullasery-Perandur Canal, the constraints of the railway tracks and Ale Jacob flyover, and lastly, the issues of safety from crime in the area were primary drivers for what we saw as a comprehensive solution. So our key moves were to create a pedestrian network and a public interface with the proposed green corridor, and therefore have a permeable ground level in the bus station building, leave the western edge on the north-south side, on this north-south side for a stormwater management, passive recreation and pedestrian uses, and finally promote the possibilities for a sustainable and viable development. And this was done by creating a public space interface with the city fabric towards the west. The resolution of the bus station for capacity, pedestrian movement and vehicular circulation was difficult to crack. And the schematic or systemic solution for all these three components sort of kept simmering in the background for very long. The first hurdle was that the data regarding the trip characteristics that were given by the organizers was cryptic and not of much use. So we consulted some friends who were transportation planners and figured out that we would have to proceed based on certain assumptions. The subsequent struggle was to work out the system for the terminal and circulation that was suitable for the site plan diagram we desired to follow.
So the big breakthrough ultimately was to sandwich the vehicular access and movement between both levels of the bus station concourses. So you can see that in the kind of exploded perspective rendering at the top. So this immediately freed up the required amount of space on the western edge of the site for the ecological recreation zone, and it tied up very neatly with the pedestrian zone and the green corridor on the eastern edge. The elevated carriageways also made it easier to regrade the canal edge to accommodate tidal inundation and limit hardscaping at the ground level. So the ecological recreation zone was envisaged as a blue-green zone graded into detention basins and 3 depths relative to the top of the canal. And this is an image from the bayous at Buffalo, New York in the US, where it kind of led to our inspiration of how we could separate out multiple modes of movement, vehicular and pedestrian and cycle, and manage stormwater.
The articulation, of course, of this blue-green infrastructure was based upon the vision of integrating the open space and facility with the city, and therefore envisaged it as a vibrant, active open space for use by all. The spatial physical organization of the built components used a system of service codes and a viable structural grid that was deployed across the site for the terminal building and commercial blocks. And we decided that restricting the consumption of the full available FAR was necessary, and this was done by building only as much as was optimum in terms of metabolic flows and real estate viability. All of this together made the fundamental ecological approach possible. We were also very sure that the bulk of the built mass could not be incomparably higher than that of the surroundings, as is visible in the lower part of the image in the slide. So this brings us to the final challenge, which was to compact all of this that we have discussed and talked about and several other minutiae into 2 sheets while retaining legibility. And so reminiscent of our student days, it was accomplished with several near all-nighters. It was a lot of hard work, but worth every bit what we gained out of the whole exercise. In retrospect, this competition was an enjoyable journey, and what we gained out of it was a lot. Learning more about the involved subjects, collaborating online, and how to achieve the most through optimum intervention. This exercise offered us the opportunity to position our design solutions within the larger discussions of sustainable human habitats and contemporary urban challenges. So in the process of bridging fine-grained interventions that address larger scale issues, we reaffirmed our belief in a contextually grounded and practically appropriate design. With this, we would conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So thank you, Anamika and Team Plus, for that in-depth presentation. Hearty congratulations on being shortlisted for this very interesting Entekochi Urban Design Competition. I have few questions for you, you all, that on the experience of working towards this competition. So my first question is, your approach towards this competition appears to be built up into a story after deriving a framework for understanding the place through correlating various aspects of the precinct with its past and its larger context. So would you say this approach is site-specific and was developed for this project? Why or why not?
Okay, I'll go first. So look, at the end of the day, every design is site-specific, whether it is contextual or relevant to its day and age is really another matter, and that depends on the perspective of the viewer. So when you get into a competition as complex as this one, and it involves, just to list, urban design, transportation, real estate, economics, sociology, architecture, infrastructure, landscape architecture, and ecology, and you have a multidisciplinary team such as ours working on it, it's really hard for it not to be site-specific in terms of its physical layout. So the narrative, or the katha as we named it, is a device to bring some order to a lot of different threads of thought. While staying focused on the canal, it's very easy to lose the thread of what this competition was about, and that is the revitalization of the canal, which is the main reason for the competition in the first place. And I think maybe Anamika has something to add here as well.
I would. Thanks, Aditya. I think what you actually hit the nail on the head about being site-specific, but I'd like to add that apart from the physical and spatial concept, there was this very prominent question which was asked of us and which as a team also we'd like to focus on, which is that will the scheme work in reality and can it really be implemented? Any plan that doesn't take into account the political and economic ground realities which are at stake and therefore likely fails while being implemented isn't site-specific. So our project formulated a strong real estate framework and an architectural framework and program that we felt must underlie the urban design approach. And this was not so much in terms of determining the spatial configurations, but more so in trying to create an economic incentive for the success of the open space and the ecological strategies that we were proposing as part of our larger design proposal.
Thank you.
That's all actually.
Anamika, for answering that. Quite interesting. So I move on to my next question. So being a multidisciplinary team and working remotely across the globe, do you think this way of working has proved easier for you due to clear hierarchy or delegation of responsibility and authority? And do you believe that this is a way of working that helped you work together during the pandemic?
I think I'll take this one, Aditya. A very important factor in the way our team collaborated is that all of us had worked with someone else on the team before. And some of our friendships actually date back decades. So a conventional hierarchy that you mentioned did not really exist, and our interactions were like a working group of equals. We gave credit to those who had experience in a particular design or particular discipline, and we didn't step on each other's toes. We used to use Zoom as our platform for our weekly Saturday morning meetings in which we reviewed the work that had been completed the week before, and we also used the same time to discuss the way forward. All team members shared images to support their discussion points, and meetings were very free-flowing and participatory, which is just the way how we all operate. And this was also very, very important because in the end, our scheme was not the brainchild of any one person. What our scheme consisted of was, I would say, it would not have been what it turned out to be had the inputs of even any one team member not been in place. So it was a absolutely collaborative effort. Yeah,
yes.
That's what you would like to add.
Yeah, so I would agree. But underlying all of this is that Anamika and Siddhartha were the really hard-working production team who actually translated all the ideas that were discussed in the meeting, and there were lots of ideas. And they made it into drawings, and then they would send us, the rest of the team, drawing updates as needed. So we emailed each other a lot, as you would expect. And this method of remote collaboration has been in place around the world for years now. It's not new in the pandemic. It can be seen in the amount of outsourced design and rendering that takes place across the globe, as well as in large multidisciplinary infrastructure projects in which teams are based in different cities or different countries. So, design can be and has been global before this. So, while pre-pandemic we haven't engaged with this method in our professional practices, and I'm speaking for team and for the office where I practice in the US. But in the age of video technology, it's not that much of a stretch to shift into this mode. And given the geographically dispersed nature of our team, it may not have been much different without the pandemic, except that the core production team at Team would have had more immediate in-person coordination, but they were kind of kept apart because of the pandemic. So, and finally, in retrospect, I think Saurabh and I kind of felt, and we knew that landscape drawing support, which we did not have, would have been really beneficial to better illustrate some of the open space and ecological arguments that we were trying to make in this project. But otherwise, I think that Anamika and Siddhartha, between them, did a fabulous job on those two sheets.
Yes, thank you, Anamika. Thank you, Arpit, for sharing your experience working on this remotely on this project. I move on to my next question. So, what challenges have you faced and perhaps overcome while working online and across cities and with a team with varying experience and professional expertise? Could you share some of advantages or as well as disadvantages that you found in this way of working?
I'd probably like to take that answer first. So like we implied in our previous answer, our familiarity with each other personally as well as professionally meant that we didn't have much of an uptime in terms of getting to know each other and working together. So we were often running from the first meeting itself. So in some ways, yes, that is an advantage. However, while the competition was right up our alley in terms of our skill sets, we almost nearly did not participate. This was because we weren't sure of whether we could manage doing the competition, not designing it so much, but the sheer production of the deliverables, the sheets and the report and all the work that goes into it. Within the time constraints, and given that our current work commitments meant that all of us would be meeting on once, maybe at the most twice a week, we all would have preferred, and like Arvind sir mentioned, that the core production team in Delhi and our team, we would have preferred to meet in person and interact more frequently probably, but that was not possible because three of our members live in Noida and Ghaziabad, which is in UP, and the borders between Delhi and UP remained sealed due to the COVID-19 lockdown for a very long time, so we really could not meet. All four of us could not get together much.
So while everyone working online and remotely is possible and it can be successful, over years we've seen that the nature of the design process is such that the more people you have working in this collaboratively in the same space is much better. There are nuances to in-person collaboration or teaching for that matter that it's really hard to replicate that into a web meeting. And also the communication and feedback cycle is slower as compared to a physical setting. You have people across the table and you can really get a lot done very quickly. We see that in our practice nowadays. You can spend days and days on emails, which could be just replaced with one half-an-hour in-person meeting. Anyway, all of that said, Saurabh and myself, we would not have been part of this competition had our presence not been enabled by technology. I mean, Saurabh is in Bhopal, I'm in California. And as we mentioned in the previous answer, global is now local in terms of accessing resources online. During our meetings, team members could access images off the web quickly and immediately share them to explain a design concept. And that is a really, really powerful tool compared to, say, 20 or 30 years ago, where you had to go running to a library or your own library and find books. And you can actually, the discussion can move in different directions very quickly.
Thank you, sir, on reflecting.
I'd like to add to that.
Sure. Sorry.
No, just a little bit in terms of advantages and disadvantages of working in this method. So, like we mentioned, we were using Zoom as our platform. I felt that in such sort of a remote collaboration, our process of discussions was a little limited by the use of the online markup tools, but we managed somehow. What we found to be really useful was to be able to occasionally use hand sketches and take photographs of those sketches and share that sometimes almost immediately in order to communicate our ideas, because it was very helpful, because in an annotated hand sketch you can get across a lot of ideas faster than we were able to do on using online markup tools. Yeah, so
Thank
that's just what I had to add.
Yeah, thank you, Anamika. Quite interesting. You kind of found a way and, kind of worked towards it. So, my final question, very important. Uh, Landscape architecture and the study of layers of a place played an important role in formulating your strategy and design solution. However, landscape architecture as work that landscape architects do often evoke varied understandings. So, do you feel that this leads to a dichotomy in the perception of landscape architect's role? And could you project like this bridge the gap?
I'm going to let Anamika go first on this one.
Okay, I would like to say that given that we have a multidisciplinary team, what we knew for sure is that all of us have a very deep respect for landscape architecture and its role in the urban space. And so for us, it was understood that in terms of physicality, our scheme would be an ecology and landscape driven scheme. In fact, the first choice for group members while we were trying to formulate a core team was to talk about Adit sir and Saurabh sir, because we knew that our landscape architects had to be in place before we even thought of the other experts. So both of them were involved in this competition design right from the start, and as landscape architects and educators, their role was to basically take a broad overview of the urban design strategies as we kept formulating and developing them, to make sure that the embedded ecological principles remained intact, and to suggest ways in which landscape would form the basis for environmental and social democratic ideas that underpin the renovated and reconfigured open space. Aditya, you would like to elaborate, I think, on this.
Well, so a team without landscape architects could conceivably develop a scheme which relied only on engineering and infrastructure to address ecological issues. And this is, it's been the case like this around the world for decades. But this wasn't the case with our entry or the three shortlisted entries, which I happened to see. I didn't see any of the others, that the three entries which moved to the second stage. So this question about perception in the real world, the gap that has to be bridged is actually less with the design profession and more with the government officials in India, the IAS officers, who actually have to make the decisions. With very few exceptions, they still see landscape architecture as greenery associated with buildings and infrastructure, which, by the way, in itself is not a bad thing compared to, let's say, what it was 20 or 30 years ago. But it's still woefully an incomplete vision of what the discipline is about. So, in that sense, yes, a competition like this can definitely chip away at that mental block, that gap in perception. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much what we have to say.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Anamika.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Thank you, Adit sir and Anamika, for sharing your experiences while working on this urban design competition. Considering the complexity of the competition, which involved so many disciplines, a, a very important aspect you brought forward was that in this case, or for the matter of fact, any design, site specificity is of utmost importance and should be given that that value. And so along with that, it was interesting to know how you all used katha, a narrative, as a device to weave different disciplines and thoughts together, thus narrowing down the focus on canal revitalization. It was interesting to know that being multidisciplinary team, landscape approach aided with respect to aided design with respect to urban context, where the physicality of the project was ecology and landscape driven scheme, and how engaging landscape architect from the start of the process helped contribute towards developing urban strategies which were aligned with ecological principles. And in a way, I can say that a landscape approach which formed basis for environmental and social ideas that helped the reconfiguration of open spaces. Lastly, thank you again for sharing your experiences, especially on the online collaboration, wherein you brought forward the pros and cons of working this way. And a fact that Adit sir highlighted, that remote working has always been existed around the globe. And in your team, some of you were already been acquainted with working this way. And that kind of aided your free flow discussions. So it was very interesting to understand this way of working from your perspective. Thank you all for joining us today.